Out of all the people I know fairly well, I think I was one of the last to do yoga. My initiation into yoga was through Kundalini yoga, and it happened because I was falling in love. Kundalini yoga focuses more on spiritual practices related to the energies in the body. It combines breath, movement, and sound. On my first visit to Grand Rapids, Michigan to spend time with Jeanette, who is now my partner, she invited me to a 5 a.m. yoga session with her good friend Suzanne, who was the yogi. What could possibly go wrong, I thought. And don't I want to seem as if I'm game to try new things? I knew, even at that point, how much it meant to Jeanette, so I wanted to go and understand more about what drew her. This was all long before COVID, so I had gone to see her when I was very sick and could not breathe through my nose. That's a small, important detail that will come up soon because you breathe through your nose in Kundalini yoga. She told me the night before that we would just get up and go, and I explained that I would need a cup of coffee before I went. She said, "You're not supposed to have caffeine before you do yoga." And I said, "I'm going to need a cup of coffee before I go." So after my cup of coffee at 4:30 a.m., we set out for yoga. I loved every minute of it, and I was also aware at how I wasn't great at it. Well, I should say, I wasn't even really good at it. My third eye wandered a bit. I couldn't breathe through my nose. I couldn't sit straight for long periods of time. My legs don't fold up in that position that a lot of people's do, but I could do all the rest of it. Our kids thought it was so funny that Jeanette had gotten me to do yoga. They bought me a yoga mat for Christmas that year. Since then, I have pondered why it took me more than 50 years to do yoga. That tells you I'm more than 50. Somewhere in the mix of all of my ponderings, I've come to realize it was the deep-seated teaching I received as a young person about Christianity and how you can't mix Christianity with other religions or spiritualities. In the very conservative context I grew up in related to church, I was taught that the devil would try to use all of these other things to draw people away from Christianity and get them to worship false gods. It was Christianity only and above all else to which I was to pledge my allegiance and to which I was to convert all others. At some point in my adult life, I realized that I no longer believe it has to be Christianity only, and I realized Christianity is one path among many that ultimately lead to divine love. Now that I am as old as I am, I'm mourning how much I have missed out on by not spending decades exploring what other spiritual traditions have to say and what practices they use that inspire wisdom and compassion and love and peace and justice. So this 7-week inner spiritual meditation that is a 7-step process is my attempt to share with you some spiritual values and steps that are based on the world's spiritual traditions and are completely accessible to people from all kinds of different traditions and deepen us within our own traditions. Many of us are familiar with the movement toward interfaith dialogue and even cooperation. The interfaith movement began because 3 of the largest world religions share a common ancestor in Abraham, and historically, we've been murdering each other. So Christian, Jewish, and Islamic scholars, leaders, and members began meeting in groups to explore what they had in common and what their differences were, with the clear understanding that it was no one's job to convert another. It was simply listening to understand and gaining in respect. For many people, that's where the exploration and conversation ended. But for others, the interfaith movement didn't go far enough and certainly didn't include so many spiritual and ethical traditions. Dr. Ed Bastian is a friend of ours, and he was a member of the Snowmass conferences that were convened yearly by Father Thomas Keating, in which spiritual leaders and mentors from around the world would gather together in Colorado, usually in Colorado, and they would meditate together several times a day and then have conversation about their experiences and then their traditions. What became clear in the Snowmass conferences was that though their paths differed, they led to very similar places. From that experience, Ed Bastian decided to devote the rest of his life to convene a spiritual paths seminar where he asked spiritual exemplars from each of the world's spiritual traditions to gather and consider specific themes or questions. Many of the names that he gathered together are names that you would know and recognize. So they started as private dialogues, and then at the end of each of these gatherings, they would do public teachings. And this is how the 7-step process for interspiritual meditation came into being. So today, we're going to explore step 1. Step 1 uses the refrain, "May we be happy and healthy." And this first step, as I have come to understand it through some study, is really about motivation. Now, before you go down that trail in your head about how this is going to be all about getting motivated to exercise or lose weight, fear not. This first step is about establishing our motivation for physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual healing, leading to sustainable happiness. Motivation is also about what is needed to sustain spiritual practices over a lifetime. Many of us go in and out, we lose motivation over time. As we begin this step, we consider all of the people and places and experiences that give us motivation to work on our healing. We think about family, chosen family, friends, mentors, communities of which we are a part, groups we belong to, traditions that are meaningful for us, the natural world and what draws us there, and even the work we want to do or the challenges that come our way that deepen our wisdom and compassion. In this first step, the place we begin is contemplating our suffering. We want to understand the suffering that drives us towards seeking outward escapes or pleasures that we consume in ways that are not healthy and add to our suffering. If we can name and acknowledge our suffering, we find our motivation for desiring health and happiness. It's important in this U.S. culture within which we live that we recognize how often the messages around what it takes to be happy or what it takes to be healthy are warped messages. We are a culture built on the lie that being white means being superior. We are a fat-phobic culture, and we overvalue thinness, so the messages are given that to be happy, you need to be thin, or to be healthy, you need to be thin and run a certain amount each week. We never stop to question who's coming up with the standards by which we're all judged. We also live in a culture that prioritizes and values being straight over being queer, coupling over being single, bearing children over being or choosing to be childless, being wealthy over being poor or even just beyond poor. All of these messages get into our heads and they work their ways into our bodies, creating less and less happiness. While this 7-step meditation process is not about self-help, but about impacting the consciousness of the world, it begins with us understanding and getting to know the divine in each of us. It is first an inward process that then also impacts the communal process and consciousness. Fortunately, science has done us a huge favor by connecting our minds and our bodies and proving that what is wrong with our bodies when illness occurs goes way beyond what is happening physically. Western doctors are only just beginning to consider the mental causes of physical diseases. Interspiritual meditation focuses on creating a healthy mind which works toward a healthy body. We can certainly extrapolate here to the communal image of the body of Christ or the church. When I was a chaplain with hospice 20 years ago, I had a patient who was dying of stomach cancer. She talked to me about her discovery of the connection between her mind and her body. She had been abused as a child in a large family, and she said she thought she had locked the abuse away in her mind in order to keep it secret. It wasn't until she was diagnosed with advanced stomach cancer that she realized her secret had manifested itself in her physical body. She ended up telling her family of origin about the abuse. While her stomach cancer ended up taking her life, she felt healed. In other words, she felt happy and healthy in her mind and her body, and she believed she had extra time because of a remission period from her cancer. Now, we never want to make the mistake of saying that every illness is connected to some sort of trauma or abuse in the body. That is not always true. What we're saying here and what we're doing here is connecting mind and body so that we can begin to see the value of creating a healthy mind that then leads to healthy body. So how do we do that? How do we create a healthy mind? This is where I want to reference our verses from Luke. In a chapter that has different sayings of Jesus, including some terrifying visions of the end times, apparently, the Pharisees asked Jesus when the kingdom or realm of God would come. We understand the word kingdom to mean realm. So when is this realm coming anyway? They wanted to know. Jesus responded by saying something odd. Jesus told them, the realm can't be observed. And then Jesus said, remember, the realm of God is within you. This is perhaps one of the most important sayings of Jesus. We get used to thinking of the realm of God as though it's a city or a community of people or something we can point to and say, look, there it is. Jesus is speaking a profound truth here by saying, the realm of God is within you. What makes the realm of God is that you would know and access the divine in you, so that when you are living in the world, you are living from a place of Godness. We think of that as being able to know and access wisdom, compassion, peace, love, justice. When we live in the world from that spiritual connection to our source, we are, and we also create, the realm of God. The realm of God is not visible or observable unless we live it. Some scholars have translated the word within as among, which I think is a great reminder that it's both. Similarly, the word you is both singular and plural. The realm of God is within you, and when we are together, it is among us. I would expand that to other beings as well, because I'm convinced that other living beings have the divine in them as well. What separates us from them is our minds made up of conscious and unconscious thought. So part of creating a healthy mind is our desire to know and to live with and from this divine in us. This is one of the motivations for healing. So a big step toward creating a healthy mind is meditation. And specifically for the next 7 weeks at least, and hopefully beyond, this process that we're going to be learning called interspiritual meditation. It is a meditation process. We all have different ideas of meditation, so we should begin with understanding what's meant by meditation. Meditation is an internal process. According to Dr. Ed Bastian, meditation is a process for disciplining, focusing, and calming the mind. It can be practiced both in secular and in sacred contexts. In a secular context, it can lead to inner tranquility, while also helping to heal or prevent many of the psychological causes of physical illness. As a spiritual practice, which is what we're concerned with, it can help to center us in the essential nature of our being and to transform our experience of the human condition, bringing it into harmony with our most profound aspirations for liberation, wisdom, and compassion. Meditation helps the practitioner to achieve the goal of health and happiness. He goes on to say that the spiritual practitioner is also trying to influence and transform the consciousness for others, both here and throughout eternity. Each week of this series, we're going to learn a spiritual practice that goes along with the step. We're also going to learn the chant that goes with the 7-step process so that it will be a part of us. Each week we'll listen and watch the video that Ed did with one of his colleagues that describes each step. After that, I'll invite us to the offering, give our invitations for the day, and then we're going to enter into the spiritual practice for the day. And each week we'll be singing the same sending song so that it gets deep within us. Today's practice for step 1 will be centering prayer, which is a simple but not easy process for learning meditation. How many of you have ever tried centering prayer before as a spiritual practice? A few of you. I thought maybe a few of you had. Some of you might be drawn more to the idea of prayer than to meditation, and you can use them interchangeably with the understanding that meditation is not us talking. It's a difference. Centering prayer is a practice that came out of the Christian tradition, so it seems like a good place for us to begin. I'm going to lead you through it here in church so we can at least get a sense for it, and the hope is that you will practice it through the week before you come back again next week to learn the next practice. After learning the 7-step inner spiritual meditation process, you will have also learned 7 spiritual practices. As we continue to feel outrage and even despair about what is going on in our city, our country, and our world, as we identify our suffering and feel motivated to be happy and healthy through healing, may we feel grounded in meditation for the communal work ahead of us. Amen.